This is dropped onto our template, which has come in handy, thankfully. Yeah, that a lot of you have been using that. One thing I do recommend is that, particularly when we print things, notice how the plan just kind of gets lost in the context there. We almost lose it. And it's interesting, perhaps, to allow it to fade into the context like that. It might be a good thing for us to do. But at any rate, it can be difficult to read our actual plan if we're layering it on there. And I think there may be some judgment in terms of how you integrate the flood information in with your plan. That might be something to think about, maybe discuss with Neil further in terms of how your plan reads with the flood information on it. Are you layering that above it? Are you layering it below it? Those kinds of questions. One comment I did make on several of your plans, though, was to finish it out, finish out the plan. So whatever your idea is for the lower half of the property, even though it is in the floodplain, to illustrate that out with green, and so that it distinguishes from your lots and allow that to be read as wilderness or as nature area or as floodplain itself. But I think there may be some discussion in terms of how you present the information of your plans layered on top of the context and how much information you have on there. In this case, I have the plats, or I should say the lot lines. Of course, we have the flood information. But what I like to do is put a big rectangle in between that and the plan itself, one big rectangle, which is has no stroke, 0 stroke, and has white fill, and is approximately 50 to 60% opacity. And what that does is it kind of ghosts the context, but doesn't eliminate it entirely, allows your plan to pop in terms of how it sits in the context, and allows you to add things to it diagrammatically that actually could ground it there. Now, the way we drew it, if you remember last week, the way I drew the plan was basically by leaving this void as the streets, and so this allows us to start to add things to it. So if I isolate those things, the base map, the ground map, this white rectangle, this ghosting rectangle, things like that, I try to keep those on separate layers, just so I don't mess things up too badly. If you get annoyed with an object, one trick is to go object lock, and it will lock that object on its layer and it won't move around again. So that is helpful if you're getting annoyed with an object. That is one way to isolate it. Another is, of course, to leave it on its own layer. So that stuff is on its own layer. And the template has a bunch of extra layers that you may or may not need that I used from a previous map. You can delete those layers. By the way, the workspace, one of the most important findings, I think, between the 2019 and the 2020 upgrade, and including what gave me a bunch of frickin' problems 2 weeks ago, was that I didn't have a workspace activated. The Illustrator Workspace Essentials has very little on it. So if we go to Window, Workspace, Essentials, everything goes away. Where did it all go? And that's why 2 weeks ago I was like, where is this? Where? I was really struggling. What I found through some YouTube digging, and I think I shared a link to a short video, was that the painting workspace is extremely convenient for what we're doing, for the types of things that we're doing. And that brings up a series of color swatches, quick access to the stroke menu, quick access to layers. Basically, what we're doing with maps is very helpful just to have that as a shortcut right on that right-hand column. So everybody set your window to a painting workspace. That would be huge in terms of looking for all this stuff that we're layering on here. That said, Neil has taken you through a couple of things that he uses quite often. I'm appreciative of that. It's extremely helpful for him to put that together and have that as well. I learned something, so that's fantastic. It's always good to continue learning. With the line segment tool, I can basically start to weave together this plan together, even with separate line segments, like so. This is working on probably a new layer.
And so a line segment under the line segment tool, which is buried underneath the rectangle tool. Our 605s, graduate students were like, where is it? And so the line segment tool is buried under the rectangle tool. But what I can do then is extend from my plan out, extend down, and take two line segments and start to give them some character. Hold down the Shift key, I can select more than one. And then I tell it what kind of stroke to be, how thick of a stroke I want it to be. This should be review, a little bit of review for you. But one thing that's pretty cool is that you can join these things together. So under Object Path Join, it will actually create a bridge between those two line segments, even if they are slightly off. So when we're making shapes in Illustrator, the Object Path Line tool is always helpful. If you've got an unclosed shape anywhere, it will make the join or the path together, even though that's a oblong arrow, if you will. And then if it can be a dash line, so those are the options there. We tell it how much space in between. We can put an arrowhead at the end or the beginning. There are some arrowheads that are already built in to the stroke menu. Expanded options for the stroke menu are found under these little 3 bars, this 3-bar tag that's in the upper right of the stroke menu. There's additional options for Illustrator menus that are built in to those 3 little bars. So throughout the Adobe world, if you will, those 3 little lines in the upper right-hand corner of any menu will get you connected to more stuff. I can change the size of that arrowhead, body or shape, or otherwise, and I can start diagramming over my proposal and connecting it to the context. The comment that I put in some of yours was that your sitemap needs to be reconnected to its context so that the viewer understands how things align or don't align, and that that's readable against the whole. And so I might think about maybe a different color for that, or something bolder, or something much more noticeable. Hello, much more noticeable there, or making it a solid line, or even adding an effect. Under Effect, we have Effect, Stylize, Drop Shadow, and there's a severity or intensity of those that can allow a particular element to stand out from the rest. Now, Neil put in his video, said, beware if there's too much shadow, or he put that into his video, so there can be a degree to which there is too much shadow, and that can happen as well. But those are a couple of the elements there that are worth looking at. Another one another one I like to use a lot is the pen tool. The pen tool looks like a fountain pen on the menu. It allows you to start to create line segments of regions or arrows or masses or different land uses on a map, and eventually you can join it together like so. And Object Path Join will join those segments together. I've got it right now on a stroke, so I might pick a stroke width or stroke line. I could make it a dashed line with the stroke menu, set the severity of the dashes really close together. It starts to read a certain way. We can pick different caps and corners and characters to that line. We can tell it to chase or to reach the edges, so it creates these boxy sort of ends here. We probably won't put arrowheads on it. It wouldn't make too much sense. But what I like to do as well is add a fill to that. So under color swatches, which is a good reference, rather than making up a color every single time, you can fill over that and then turn down the opacity significantly so that you're just highlighting one segment of a neighborhood versus another. And I pointed out to you in your location maps, it would be good to put a color highlight over Ball State, for instance, to distinguish Ball State's campus from the rest of the context on your location maps. There's a series of shapes and symbols for that. So if we go to box, resources, maps, there is Flat Icon is a free resource that has a series of SVGs and PNGs that are free for download, as long as you don't sell them. You're a student, so you're doing educational work, so you're not selling. But it has a ton of free graphics. So let's say map marker location, or something like that. It's going to give you about 30 or 40 or 60 of those to choose from. Okay, so any of those now you can download and put into your personal digital library to create as a map marker for your future maps. So flaticon.com, fantastic resource, lots of great free icons. Yeah, so any one of those can be downloaded. So let's say one of the more stylish map markers, perhaps, you can download it as an SVG, simplified vector graphic, or as a PNG, portable network graphic. A PNG is pixel. That is a pixel-based image, so it can be used in Photoshop. It will download at a certain resolution, but if you stretch it too far, it will start to fall apart. A simplified vector graphic is a vector image that is Illustrator and AutoCAD's native language vector. You can scale a SVG image as far as you want, and it will still be crisp and clean, as big as you make it. Okay, so let's say I was interested in this map marker. I would select either PNG or SVG from 16 pixels wide all the way up to 512 pixels wide, or an SVG. Either way, they're in business to make money, so just know that there are folks who pay for these, because if you're using this image commercially, if you're selling this as a website or as a brochure to somebody, or doing somebody's logo, you are ethically supposed to buy it from the source. But a free download, do that. It goes straight to my download menu. There it is. Save that to my desktop, I think. Get that out of the way. And then I'll go to my labels, layer, place, downloads, marker, and then find a place for that in my digital library. It'll come in big. You can scale it down. Just grab one corner, and the Shift key will keep its proportional attributes correct, and you can then start to use any number of symbols as map markers. All right. Next, back in Books, under Maps. So there's the link for Flat Icon is in Maps. Wikimedia Commons Key Maps of Indiana. What are those? Well, that is a helpful part of your location map that helps your viewer zoom in from the Earth to the state of Indiana, to Delaware County, to the incorporated area of Muncie. These are free maps on Wikimedia Commons, every county, every state in the Union. Okay, so you just have to look for them under Wikimedia. Whatever state, whatever city you're looking in, just know that you can find a key map that brings your viewer into the region of the Earth that you are looking at. Right? Your first-time viewer who doesn't know anything about Story Elementary needs to be brought into the state and into the county and into the city before they look at your location map. Before they look at your location map. So these are good things to put in the margin of the corner of kind of your first page or the beginning of the board. I share this with everyone every year, even at 30-year review. I'm like, please put a key map of Indiana at the beginning of every project that has a site in Indiana, etc., or Michigan or Ohio. And these are free, so they are. I think I mentioned that 2 or 3 times already, but there are more than one available here. So size of this PNG preview is 650 by 550. Other resolutions. Right below it, you can see you can download a PNG of these all the way up to 1210 by 1024. big, big file. You can also download the original file, which is a simplified vector graphic, and that will you can save that then to your background. Am I getting that right? Save. What's also interesting, if you download the SVG version, you can explode that in Illustrator and use it for another map or for another county. There are elements that you can actually explode and use that in Illustrator. So that's a helpful one. But I think for our purposes, pretty good resolution is probably going to be okay. I can drag that right to my desktop or save that. And I can place that directly into Illustrator. I do a lot of drag and drop because how the Mac behaves with these. You either can drag and drop yourself, or you can actually place each image individually. So this might be something that would either inhabit a corner of a board or go into the margin or become part of the legend. And that can get as small as it needs to be. I can also put an effect on it. Any one of the effects will just make it pop. Okay? So we're all about making it pop, right? This could very well be even part of your legend. So if that becomes part of the information, down further as part of an individual map or as part of a page in any of your presentations. Hold down the Shift key, and it will keep it proportional. This brings us into the context of the state and the region and just allows your viewer to understand what they're looking at and where they're looking at. Okay? Potpourri. Lots of small things today. Next. Walk score. How many of you use walk score in Plan 100? Good. I don't need to cover it. Okay. Similar to walk score, the AARP Livability Index. It's similar. It has similarities to walk score. And if you Livability Index AARP.org, it's also linked in Books under Resources, Links, AARP Livability Index. And I have to close out my other windows. Our address is 3411 Mansfield Drive. Don't all talk at once. Okay. So to have AARP getting involved in housing and in rating communities is interesting. It's also interesting to see that happening in context of the other things that are happening when we consider social justice, redlining, affordable housing, availability of affordable housing, availability of mortgages. All of that starts to connect to some of the other social justice issues that we have. What do these numbers mean, and where do you get these numbers? Might be worthy of us to critique and understand as planners to understand where these ratings come from. So this neighborhood that we're in, well, this portion of 47304 isn't I mean, it's okay, 51, right? But if you're a senior citizen looking to relocate to this area, you're going to be looking for something more than 51, right? You're going to be looking at something along the lines of 70 or 80 before you invest in the neighborhood. So if we're going to sell senior housing here, this livability index maybe needs to be looked at, and can your site also provide some of the amenities that are missing? Environment, housing, neighborhood, transportation, health, engagement, opportunity, those sorts of things. And like walk score is based on walkability to and proximity to certain things. This livability index is based on a lot of those metrics that seniors think about when they start to think about downsizing or an age-in-place environment or an assisted living environment or an independent living environment. So similar to walk score, the livability index looks at a lot of these different issues. Potpourri. Next thing. links. The ESRI Tapestry. ESRI is a GIS company, yes, okay? So GIS, ArcGIS, they produced ArcGIS. They have, well, how do I say this? Sometimes controversial categories for neighborhoods. Soccer moms, median age 36.6, professional management college degree, median income. Heartland communities, median age 41, median income 39K, services or professionals, high school diploma only. ESRI starts to make neighborhood characterizations and generalizations around these demographic categories. Who uses this stuff primarily? Who would use this type of information? Housing developer. Who else? Sorry? Realtors? Yep. Someone wants to move there. What's happening on November 3rd? Political scientists use this to start canvassing areas for elections as well, okay? So all of this becomes extremely valuable information to all those professionals. So let's look up our zip code. All right, so our zip code, most demographic data that you're going to be looking at as planners is designated by zip code. So all of your census data is by zip code. All of your demographic data is based on zip code. So usually as planners, when we're doing any kind of demographic study, it begins with the zip code. That's why we have these phrases. It shouldn't matter which zip code you're from to determine your destiny. That's why that phrase comes from when we start thinking about the social justice movement. Where is Ball State in that? Where is Ball State in that? When you lived on campus, what was your zip code? Yes, 47306 has been isolated from the map for demographic reasons. Top Tapestry segment, dorms to diplomas. My neighborhood, Hardscrabble Road. Sounds like the title of a blues album. I went down to Hardscrabble Road. Burn, 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 burn. Okay. But if we look at where Store is at 47304, midlife constants, in style, and college towns. This is in style. We are professional couples or singles with no kids and strong work ethics. We support the arts, travel, and extensive reading. College towns. About half of us are in college and the rest often work in jobs related to college. Busy schedules, but juggle studies and part-time jobs. Midlife constants. We're seniors that are already retired or will soon. We have high net worth. Lifestyle is more country than urban, even when we live in cities. And we're generous. We like SUVs, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's interesting to explore your hometown, explore Muncie with these categorizations and just read more into them, because it's not that the data isn't there. The data is there. It's just how it's worded can be interesting sometimes. So, but read more about midlife constants. That is the demographic group that attended the meeting and that you are potentially interacting with when it comes to the future of the neighborhood. The APA competition. I want to show you something, what I did on my summer vacation. No, I was chosen by the American Planning Association to host, or not host, but to judge their annual student design competition for Houston for what would have been the Houston National Planning Conference of the American Planning Association, which did not happen in the fashion that we thought. We all thought we were going to Houston in April. And we were going to have a big convention where all of the planners in the country converge once a year. Okay? It's a great, huge convention. It takes over a whole convention hall. Last year we went to San Francisco. It was New York City the year before, New Orleans the year before, or something like that. It didn't happen, obviously, because of April. Okay? And so it was a virtual convention, but we still had the student competition anyway. And every year, APA selects a neighborhood or a site in the host city to study. And this neighborhood is called Cashmere Gardens. Is in the historic, I think, 4th Ward or 7th Ward of Houston, a traditional African-American neighborhood going back, all the way back to the Civil War. George Floyd, as you know, was born in Houston and grew up
nearby neighborhood, approximately a mile and a half from this neighborhood. This neighborhood is plagued by flooding. It's plagued by air pollution. It's plagued by disconnectivity because of a highway. A lot of the same things that we're dealing with here in Indiana in terms of dealing with stormwater and the like. This was chosen to be the winning proposal. This is from Columbia University, primarily graduate students that formed a team and entered this proposal. So take a look at their graphics in terms of how they start to fit together. From land use map, environmental resiliency, mobility, transit, impediments to access. There's a series of diagrams in the map form. The overall master plan map that deals with a floodable bayou in the north there, and then some key opportunity zones. Icons, which I just showed you, that start to float and point to specific things. Illustrator, line types and Illustrator shapes, which I just showed you, highlighting the neighbor edge as well as nodes. Color to highlight specific districts. Now, they didn't use standard land use colors, which is boy, I love it when people use standard land use colors, but they used what they did is they did a color theme that tied their whole document and their poster together. And so they have a very limited color palette that unites the entire presentation by having a very specific set of color swatches in Illustrator that allowed them to bring this whole document together. They also did some interesting hand graphics in that they traced over them, but then only isolated the people and the cars and then floated them on top of existing photographs. And then you can see probably a CAD mapper file that shows as a SketchUp model, which serves as an aerial. So this was the winning poster. Look at it just a little bit closer here. The colors are muted. Okay, they're not screaming, right? But they are somewhat muted. The context map is also muted, primarily grayscale, so that all of this information floats over it. There's probably 4 or 5 greens. There's that pink, couple of tans, but it's used to render. All these are hand graphics rendered in Photoshop and then cut out and placed over probably either a Google Street Map image. But they had good character because they did talk about some of the realities of the neighborhood as well as some of the economic opportunities for the neighborhood. This was probably a SketchUp or a Rhino file exported to Illustrator. They used a texture. They used cutout trees, so from a cutout library, and then icons are floated over it. So you start to see how a lot of the things we've been covering over the last couple of weeks in both classes can come together. Even though they might be hand graphics, digital graphics, it all can come together with a solid color theme. That was their poster. Let's look at their booklet. Let's flip through their booklet here. And it just, there were 35 registered, only 5 teams submitted. So COVID did prevent a lot of schools from entering this. This might be a template. This graphic stuff up here might be from a template, either in Google Slides, you may recognize this, or Canva. Have any of you used Canva yet? Canva is, yes, okay. It's a free desktop publishing online layout program. It's fantastic because a lot of their preloaded templates are just fantastic. So take a look for that in Canva. The color scheme is consistent. I commented, I'm a terrible judge, by the way. I'm a very difficult juror and judge. I said that sometimes their color schemes are dominating to the point where I can't even see the dots, but that might just be me. But again, this you can see that the study area is of one opacity, the area around it is of another opacity. This ghosting effect is what takes a lot of information in an aerial and then singles it down so that we can understand what we're looking at in terms of the neighborhood in between the others in Houston. So there's this ghosting effect that mutes a lot of the complexity in the colors of an aerial map to make other focus areas more readable. They went into some historical imagery and then got into the demographics and then did a land use map, probably with GIS
or exported to Illustrator. Started to look at some flood problems. Boy, does that look familiar. Oh yeah, there's a ditch. And so there is a bayou that runs through the northern half of the site, so they do have flooding. And after Hurricane Harvey, they were devastated with the flooding during Harvey. The hurricane that's headed for them now, Hurricane Sally, is developing in the Gulf as a Category 1. It could potentially head right for Houston. So these are neighborhoods that are greatly affected by increased hurricane presence and climate change. Remember, in 2020, everything is related. Everything is related. Am I right? Am I wrong? Everything's related. That's where we live in now. Here's a better view of their master plan map. You can see PNG map markers and icons. You can see numbered areas. One comment I put in some of your presentations was leader lines that cross over the plan to reach certain things. Instead of that, use a numbering system. Use a numbering system if you're putting emphasis on certain things. Instead of leader lines that cross all the way across your plan, use a numbering system, and that can key to your legend and to the information that's live there. Everything else is a typical Illustrator thing, right? Look at this arrow. That's an Illustrator fill of that tan there with maybe 20% opacity, a white stroke, and one of the arrowheads that's in Illustrator. It's already built in. So a lot of this stuff is at your fingertips in terms of what Illustrator can do and how it starts to pull it apart. On the left, probably a CAD mapper file. If that portion of Houston has been drawn by somebody in OpenStreetMap, which CAD mapper references the Wikimap. OpenStreetMap is a wiki. It is a volunteer-led map division, right? So map interface. Put in a default for building height, and you can put up a one-story urban context map and fly over it in SketchUp with 2 clicks, as we learned from CAD Mapper. CAD Mapper is that free service that allows you to grab an Illustrator file or a SketchUp file for a number of cities across the world, not all of them, not our neighborhood, but downtown Muncie has been built, and other cities have been built. But that's what can generate this overhead view very quickly. And then they probably used the same method of putting color in Illustrator over certain buildings to pop them or highlight them, or took the map into Photoshop and then they used the paint bucket to hit color on certain things. Then they picked out some cutout trees, floated them over the map, just dropped them in place. Same goes for the window details that are on the upper level, those 4 circles there, those windows that are looking at details. On the right, probably trace paper drawings or sketches over Google Street View shots, scanned in, and then they deleted away. See what they did? They deleted away the sky, they deleted away everything that wasn't a closed shape. Rendered that in Photoshop and then floated it back over the image. Fast, simple way to integrate a hand drawing with a site photograph. Okay? So not bad for 5 graduate students in the month of April and May. They were all in quarantine in Boston, or Columbia, no, New York. They were all in quarantine in New York, and so this is what they did during quarantine in our competition. But these are simple, not simple. This is a workflow that allows you to engage some free tools, some hand graphics, some visual tools, and start to combine them together. Okay? Is that giving you a clearer picture of some of the things that you can start to combine and leverage as you move forward? There was a lot of extra data that was required as well, some housing and demographic data. So these are good things to look at. I will post those later on into the resources directory. Next, Adobe Color Theme. Well, let's see. Adobe Color Themes? Yes. How did they get that color theme to work? Go to Adobe Color Wheel. I just Googled Adobe Color Wheel. And you can sign in. If you have an Adobe ID, you can sign in and start to save color themes. But there are some themes kind of already preloaded here that you can look at. There are thousands of themes that others have contributed. You can move these around and start to develop a color theme if you're interested, if that's sort of floats your boat. And then you can make it, you can force it into a split complementary, a triad, or otherwise. But I think one that's really interesting for me is if you click on Extract Theme, and then you upload any photograph, any image, any photograph. I'll go to just one of my sketches. And you drag that in there. Need something with color. All right. So I'll just take one of my sketches and drop it in there. It will create a color theme around that image. This could be one of your hand drawings. This could be your analysis map. This could be one of your SketchUp perspectives. What it does is it gives you a color theme that is centered around one of your key pieces of artwork in your presentation. Then you can take these colors and build your Illustrator or your InDesign presentation around that theme by adding these colors to your swatch menu. You sign in with your Adobe ID, you can save these color themes to your Adobe account. If not, you just click on the color and you write down, the old school way, you just write down those numbers. That's copied to the clipboard, so I can actually copy that to the clipboard and then open it as a new swatch in Illustrator, or just do a screen grab of this color theme. I can use the tools in Photoshop with the eyedropper to grab that. So I can do a screen grab of that is one way, so I can take that directly into Photoshop. I can copy them to the clipboard and create a new swatch. So that just by clicking there, it is copied to the clipboard, so I can make a new swatch in Illustrator. That becomes a new color. I can analyze this image for a few different themes. Thank you. Bright, muted, deep, dark, none. Muted looks pretty good. That is a pretty harmonious color scheme that I could build a whole presentation around just from this key image in my presentation. It might be the perspective view, it might be whatever. But if you want to build a consistent presentation around artwork you've already done or doing for the project, this is the way, this is the way, this is the way. This is the way that you can build a color scheme that will unite your entire presentation together. Take those colors back into your diagrams, customize these cells, customize the arrows. Your presentation starts to look more consistent than it did before, right? More consistent, more consistent. So, so this either is something you do at the beginning of a presentation. You could take a site photograph and do this, right? Or something at the end of a presentation. You take your final rendering, your final perspective, $1 million perspective rendering, do a color analysis, and go back and change some of your elements in Illustrator or InDesign to fit this color scheme. Okay? Potpourri. Potpourri. Let's take a break and come back, and we'll talk more about senior living communities. Okay? Take a break.